Jesus, or the evidence of the Bible as such, though there's plenty of room for ordinary non-theistic historical dispute. Let's say the Channel 9 60 Minutes team, or better perhaps the ABC Four Corners team, was actually there and did a documentary. It's all on tape, the crucifixion, the cave with the missing person, and interviews with the witnesses and all that. So let's say that it's not a 2,000-year story that's handed down, but a first-hand documentary. You still shouldn't believe the story of the Bible, and Dr. Craig made a point about the empty cave, even if it were a live report where the facts are not in doubt. It's not the facts, but the interpretation or explanation of the facts which are in dispute. Are they best explained by miracles or in some other way? Dr. Craig evidently can't think of any other more plausible way to explain the empty cave besides a miraculous one. I can think of lots. He wasn't really dead, he was just feeling a bit sick. And some friends got him out of the cave when no one was looking. Now, you're not expected to like that answer, but the point is, it doesn't matter if you don't like that particular story. Any story, other than the one that's miraculous, one that's consistent with the laws of nature, is more plausible than the miraculous one. If you can imagine an explanation consistent with the laws of nature, why would you prefer a miraculous one and say that it's more plausible? I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
In responding to Dr. Slezik's critique, I would like to pick up first on my third argument concerning objective moral values in the world. And here, frankly, after even reading his material as well as listening to his response, I'm not clear as to which of my premises he denies. My first premise is that if God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist. And he seems to grant this premise. He says that moral values are rooted in human sentiments, that to commit a moral lapse is something like doing a grammatical error. Now, that's exactly my point. Without God, there is no basis for thinking that human morality is objective. It's just rooted in human sentiments and social conventions. Michael Roos, in his article, Is Rape Wrong on Andromeda, asked the question, would rape be wrong for other intelligent organisms like extraterrestrials? And he says, although the immorality of rape is a human constant, we cannot thereby assume that it will be a constant for other organisms, including extraterrestrial intelligent organisms. Certainly, if we look elsewhere in the animal world, we see that acts which look very much like rape occur on a regular basis. Furthermore, there are good biological reasons why this sort of behavior frequently occurs. If a male animal is prepared to attempt rape on occasion, then he is more likely to reproduce than otherwise. Now, this raises some very troublesome questions. First, how should these extraterrestrials who regard rape as moral behave toward us? What if they're sufficiently similar to mammals to be able to copulate with human females? Now, to their thinking, raping throughout the earth would be morally acceptable. And if we protested, but we humans don't think that's right, then on Dr. Slezik's view, all that they would have to say is, well, that may be your human sentiments, but that morality doesn't apply on Andromeda, as Professor Slezik said. It's just an ephemeral result of your evolutionary conditioning, and our doing this is simply akin to a grammatical mistake. We speak a different moral language than you do, and for us, what we're about to do to you is perfectly acceptable. In fact, suppose these extraterrestrials were as superior to us as we are to pigs and cattle, and they decided to farm the earth and use us for laboring animals or even food. What could we say to show them that what they're doing is immoral or is wrong? There's nothing on an atheistic view that we could do to show them that human morality is objective. But secondly, why shouldn't the sexual predator rape if he feels like it? Extraterrestrials do it. Animals do it. Why shouldn't he do it? Dr. Slezik has no answer to this question. All he can say is that we humans feel that rape is wrong because it springs from human sentiments and conditioning. But so what? There's nothing objectively valid about human morality that would show that such actions are wrong. So I think that he and I basically agree that if God doesn't exist, then objective moral values don't exist. But I maintain that objective moral values do exist, and this is apparent from our moral intuitions concerning moral situations. As the ethicist Walter Sinnott Armstrong writes, the most common way to choose among moral theories is to test how well they cohere with our intuitions or consider judgments about what is morally right and wrong, about the nature or ideal of a person, and about the persons of morality. And in that sense, the apprehension of objective moral values is like the apprehension of physical objects in the world. You can't prove to the skeptic who denies the veridicality of our sensory intuitions that there are physical objects. You can't prove to the moral skeptic who denies the veridicality of our moral perceptions that there is a realm of objectively existing moral values. But in the same way that we believe in the reality of physical objects in the physical world, I think we're justified in believing in the reality of a realm of objectively existing moral values. So I think that if you agree with me that there are certain things that are really right and wrong, like child abuse, cruelty, and slavery, then you will agree with me that we need God as a transcendent foundation for those objective moral values. What about the evidence concerning the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus? Note that Dr. Slezak is prepared to grant the radical claims of Jesus, the facts of his empty tomb, post-mortem appearances, and origin of the disciples' belief. What he tries to do is to offer a counter-explanation, and I was astonished to hear him offer the old apparent death theory. This is the theological equivalent of the flat earth theory. It's been dead ever since D.F. Strauss nailed it in 1835. It has been abandoned by everyone. There's no contemporary historian who would defend the apparent death theory. Why? Well, simply because there was absolutely no doubt that the crucifixion was fatal to Jesus. The Romans were professional executioners, and they ensured the death of its victims by a spear thrust into the side of the crucified victim. Even if Jesus hadn't died, secondly, he would have certainly died of exposure in the tombs. He was bleeding from open wounds in the wrists, feet, and side without immediate medical attention. He would have certainly expired almost at once. Thirdly, even if he had revived, he was sealed inside a tomb with a huge disc-shaped stone across the door. There was no way that a man inside could get out. Fourth, even if he had gotten out, the appearance of a half-dead Jesus, desperately in need of medical attention and bandaging, would hardly have elicited in the disciples the worship of him as the risen Lord and the conqueror of death. The theory is ridiculous. And the theory finally turns Jesus into a charlatan, which is just a tawdry caricature of the historical Jesus. So that's why no contemporary historian thinks that the resurrection of Jesus can be explained away by apparent death theory. Dr. Slezak says, but it's a better explanation than a miraculous one. I would recommend, if he hasn't read it yet, to read John Ehrman's book, Hume's Abject Failure. That is this prominent philosopher of science's description of Hume's argument against miracles. The argument is completely fallacious. What is improbable is the hypothesis that Jesus rose naturally from the dead. I agree, anything is more probable than that. But that's not the hypothesis. The hypothesis is God raised Jesus from the dead, and there's nothing intrinsically improbable about that. And therefore, I think we have good grounds for believing that the best explanation of the evidence is that the disciples were telling the truth. God raised Jesus from the dead, and that entails that God exists. Finally, my fifth point was the immediate experience of God, and that's yet to be addressed in today's debate. In the absence of any good arguments for atheism, why shouldn't I believe in my immediate experience of God? Why shouldn't? I trust it. Why should I think it's delusory? God is real to me. In the absence of arguments for atheism, why not trust that experience? As for the evidence for atheism, I just want to point out a huge shift of ground on Dr. Slezak's part in the debate tonight. He now admits that the absence of evidence is not positive evidence that God does not exist, but he just says, I don't have a belief that God exists. That, however, is not atheism. Atheism is the view there is no God. What he's describing is mere agnosticism. So even if all my arguments fail, we're still left just with neutral ground, not with any positive reason to believe in atheism or the view that God does not exist, which is what the debate was supposed to be about tonight.